Alright, we're trying something different today. I'm going to read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. I've been told I have a voice that would be good for reading audiobooks. I think this is a good way to get into reading too and actually finishing this book. I started it a bit and I got a little bit into it, but I'm going to restart from the beginning. So this version is translated by George Long. And I looked it up and this is okay to read. I'm not going to get any copyright because it's public domain. So I think if this goes well in the future, I might do more public domain readings and go from there. All right, here we go. Introduction. I'll try my best with this. What is the best way to live? Would you do anything differently if you knew you were going to die tomorrow? What is true happiness? Is it within our power to achieve it, or are we merely the pawns of fate and circumstances? These are some of the questions that Marcus Aurelius' Antonius Meditations attempts to answer, both a classical and moral philosophy and a valuable historical document that sheds light on the Roman Empire at its peak. Meditations is a collection of opinions and exhortations that Marcus Aurelius, Roman Empire from 161 to 180 AD, wrote to himself. It is one of the primary texts that survived from the ancient philosophical school of Stoicism, which flourished in the Mediterranean world for approximately 600 years, roughly 300 BC to 300 AD, and it provides a compelling, if incomplete, portrait of one of the Rome's most successful empires. The book's basic message of simplicity, mindfulness, and self-control has inspired generations of philosophers, artists, and leaders, and is today's perhaps more relevant than ever. Alright, so we're getting people to join. Welcome in. That's the first paragraph, and I'm like, am I even cut out for doing this? I don't know. I need some water. Welcome in, people. I'm going to get my TikTok on my phone so I can monitor the crowd better. I got some brown noise playing in the back. I've heard that helps kind of just be more, kind of like less distracting, if that makes any sense. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to continue. I'm in the introduction right now. This is the second paragraph. Marcus's original text, which was written in Coin? I don't know how to pronounce that. Common dialect. Greek has unfortunately been lost. 8 copies from Inequality, survive that constitute the basis for all modern editions of Meditations, which is what the work is usually called in English. The original text had no title and no internal organization. The standard division into 12 parts, or books, with numbered sections within each book, was not done by Marcus himself, but by the people who handled the material after his death. Starting perhaps with his own family, these individuals would have been the ones who first collected the short manuscripts, eventually thematically related, and dubbed them simply Marcus Aurelius and Antonius, and okay, I'm really butchering that, and Antonius's book to himself. The books all address pretty much the same issue except for Book 1, where Marcus names the expresses gratitude to the people in his life who had positive influence on him. Book 1, which diverges from the other books not only in context but also stylistically, may have been originally intended for a different purpose than the rest of Meditations. Microwave egg on the stream. I don't know about that. Alright, so we made it to 2 paragraphs, and we got 3 people watching. I appreciate you guys just sticking around for this. Okay. Regardless of the relationship, if any, between Book 1 and the other 11 books, it is clear that these manuscripts were for Marcus's private use only, but not for publication. Meditations is not a personal story or a diary per se. It contains very few details about the everyday happenings in the author's life, his hopes and plans for the future, or the challenges of running the Roman Empire. It is also not a memoir or an autobiography. There are no childhood stories, no detailed accounts of palace intrigues or important political achievements, and no revealing passages about his romantic and family life. The work is not dated and does not present a chronological narrative, though it is generally assumed to have been comprised in the last 10 years of his life. Excuse me. 2 of the books 2 and 3, do indicate that they were written while he was away on military campaigns in Germany. Oh my. Hey, we got 7 people. Amazing. Appreciate you guys hanging out. 4th paragraph. We don't get a very good picture of Marcus Aurelius as a person, but we are granted an unsurprised window into his philosophical and spiritual thinking. Indeed, Meditations may be best described as a sort of spiritual workbook, a practicable manual for living, designed for Marcus's own benefit. While we will never know exactly why he composed such a work, essentially instructions to the self, we can surmise that he wrote down his thoughts so he would get a clearer idea of the issues that troubled him. Then he could revisit his own advice if necessary. In that sense, Meditations is the most personal of texts, since it records Marcus's most deeply held convictions about the good life and his own anxieties about ever achieving it. At the same time, it is curiously impersonal and austere. Never heard that word. Since it tells us very little about the other non-philosophical facets of the emperor's life. The focus is almost exclusively on self-improvement, a persistent concern with identifying what really matters in life, and with thinking and acting according to his own highest values. Are you trying to turn us on? You guys. Okay, we still got 7. Amazing. Appreciate you guys. Awesome. I'm going to get some agua. I'm going to try to reflect as I read more. A problem with me is sometimes I don't comprehend what I read, so I put on brown noise in the background to try to help me just focus. But I'm finding myself out of breath as I'm reading. See, it's my first time doing this since freaking high school, reading out of chapter books. Okay, here we go. We're back. These values were informed by Stoicism, a Greek philosophy that is well ingrained in Roman culture by Marcus's time. Indeed, it was the de facto religion of Rome's upper class, although they were outwardly and ritualistically polytheistic. Educated and aristocratic Romans of the period were brought up in and aspired to live by the tenets of Stoicism. Stoicism teaches that the key to happiness is self-control. It is only by mastering our emotions and acting rationally and deliberately that true happiness can be achieved. True happiness, then, is inner peace, a sense of settledness, and is not to be confused with the seeking of pleasure and the avoidance of pain and suffering. The Stoics didn't think that being happy means feeling like jumping up for joy at every moment. Pleasure may certainly accompany happiness, but it is not its essence. All right, what do you guys think? This is just the intro right now, but we'll keep going. According to Stoicism, several factors contribute to self-control, and therefore happiness. Firstly, it is important to know what you can and cannot control. Marcus perfectly expresses the Stoic perspective on the issue when he says, "It is not in our power not to be disturbed in our soul, for things themselves have no natural power to form our judgments. Consequently, if thou art pained by any external thing, it is not that disturbs thee, but thy own judgment about it, and it is not in thy power to wipe out this judgment now." Epictetus, Epictetus, don't know how to pronounce that. One of the main Stoic thinkers and the major influence on Marcus also articulates this point neatly in his Enchiridion. Human beings are disturbed not by things, but by the views they take of them. Stoicism constantly emphasizes the fact that most things in life are not under our direct command, and so there is little we can do about them. Simply put, we are not responsible for them. We cannot vary the path of a hurricane, stop the spread of a virus, decide not to get cancer, or make someone admire us. So it is pointless to despair over what we cannot change. Instead, the Stoics argue our energies are better spent focusing on what we can change, our own mind and behavior. Gonna get a deep breath. What's up, Ezra Pickles? Hello. Appreciate you guys hanging around. This is great. The popular serenity prayer: God grant me the serenity to accept things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Composed by American theologian Reynold Niebuhr, captures the Stoic outlook so well. For Marcus and the Stoics, our first duty is to manage our perception of reality. Reality is neither good nor bad. It just is. Good and bad are simply labels that we apply to things on the basis of how we respond to them, which in turn depends on how we view or interpret them. Echoing the Stoic thought, Shakespeare famously wrote in Hamlet, "There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so." It is then up to us, the Stoics argue, to alter our interpretation to recognize that one thing is perception, another reality, and to transform bad into good or just neutral. This goes with some of my thoughts about thoughts in general. Like as we just take in thoughts, there's no such thing as a good or bad thought. It's like what we do with that thought that defines who we are. Like we can ruminate on thoughts. We can keep negatively thinking, but like we can choose to accept what we hold on to as a thought. So like impulsive thoughts, I don't think are bad. It's just like, what do we do with that, right? There's a story I can tell, but I'm not going to get into it. I'm going to get some more water. More water. Very nice. Appreciate you guys hanging out. This is great. All right. Here we go. We're getting more into it. It is worth emphasizing that the Stoics weren't just talking about our response to injury, disease, or natural disasters, all of which are pretty clearly outside our control, but about interpersonal relationships as well. They were well aware that humans are a social species whose happiness and well-being depend on some extent on others, if only because our psychology, and hence our capacity to even achieve happiness, is molded early on by parental bonds, education, and other social influences. After all, Stoicism itself, and philosophy generally, needs to be taught and learned, but the Stoics, and particularly Marcus, believes that once you are old enough to fully qualify as rational, your happiness was basically your own responsibility, and it would be a mistake to think that it could come from other people. Other people are never actually in your power. You can't, for example, control what comes out of another person's mouth. If someone says something unpleasant to you, those comments are owned entirely by the other person, and you can choose whether to feel insulted by them or not. To control the utterances of another person implies control of the person's mind, an impossibility. For the same reason, we shouldn't care what others think of us, except perhaps if you believe someone means you serious harm. Those thoughts, too, belong to a mind you cannot control. Marcus states, do not waste the remainder of life on thoughts about others. What is such a person doing and why? And what is he saying? And what is he thinking of? And what is he contriving? And whatever else of the kind that makes us wander away from the observation of our own ruling power. Other people's thoughts are literally none of your business. And the flip side of this is also true. No one can control you. It is impossible to force you to do or say anything, since you and no one else are the master of your own mind. What this means is that if your mind is free, you are free, even if you are a slave, as Epictetus was. As Marcus points out repeatedly, wise and good people concentrate on others' own thoughts and improving their own minds, and on learning to live peacefully and rationally. Our dealings with others should be based on the simple maxim: if it is not right, don't do it. If it's not true, don't say it. In general, the Stoics argue we need to let go of the idea that we can dictate another person's thoughts and actions. At best, we might influence them, but no more. Hey, Moses. Just passing through, sorry. No, you're good. Good seeing you guys. Hey, we got 5 people. Amazing. Can you slow down? Yeah, sorry. I don't know if this is my first time reading out loud, so I can definitely slow down. Okay. A second key element for building mental strength and self-control is to practice certain techniques, all of which are in evidence in meditations. One technique is mindfulness, which is simply paying attention to what is going on, inside and outside yourself, in the present moment. This is rather similar to the contemporary Buddhist concept of mindfulness, except that the Stoics didn't specify a focus on the breath, which reminds me to breathe. If you are fully aware of what you are thinking and feeling, you are better able to rid yourself of negative and false beliefs and replace them with positive and true ones, or indeed with anything at all. Marcus, perhaps too optimistically, states, how easy is it to repel and to wipe away every impression which is troublesome or unsuitable, and immediately to be in all tranquility. Mindfulness also allows you to monitor and restrain emotions. Like other Stoics, particularly Seneca, who wrote a whole essay on it, Marcus was especially interested in understanding and overcoming anger. He believed it was a dangerous emotion and that letting it go letting it get the best of you constituted a failure to be a fully rational human being and could lead to awful consequences. How much more pain is brought on us by the anger and the vexation caused by such acts than by the acts themselves, at which we are angry and vexed. He believed, again, perhaps too sanguinely, that anger could always be overcome by reason. A second Stoic technique is visualization, which is simply bringing up an image to one's mind and concentrating on it, thereby holding other thoughts at bay. Particularly negative and self-defeating ones, Marcus mentions how visualizing his old teacher, Fronto, afforded him a concrete and visual example of wisdom, which was helpful when self-doubting thoughts would attack him. A third, similar technique is contemplation, essentially meditation of a sort, which consists of paying sustained attention to a specific subject, real or imagined. Among the subjects of contemplation for Marcus in Meditations are his own death, the shortness of life, and the impermanence of all human achievements, the insignificance of any one human relative to the vastness of time and the universe, and the frailty and inevitable decay of the human body. He discussed these topics not in a melodramatic or morbid way, but realistically and strategically as a means to an end. The aim is not really to get to the bottom of these profound matters, but rather to reflect on them as a means of gaining perspective and confidence in everyday affairs. His meditations are spiritual exercises, not science. A fourth technique that Marcus and the Stoics employed is directing one's thoughts to a higher power, that is, to meditate on the divine. The fourth technique could be called prayer, though it would not be accurate to define Stoic prayer in the limited sense for repeating some set phrases associated with a specific religion. For the Stoics, the purpose of prayer, or more precisely, thoughts about the divine, was to elevate. Okay, I'll restart that. Or more precisely, the thoughts about the divine was to elevate the mind above mundane problems, to remember that beyond all the hardships of human existence and the shocks of sometimes chaotic and overwhelming world, there is another level of being, and that is the universe is ordered by the rational and benevolent force. This force is generally referred to as God. In Meditations, the other works in Greek and Roman philosophy, but it should not be confused with the Judeo-Christian God, which possesses many other attributes, including, of course, personality and emotion. Also, in contrast to the Judeo-Christian tradition, Stoics turned to the divine not to ask for specific favors of forgiveness, but to recall that human destiny is ultimately outside of our human control, and to activate that part of ourselves that they believe we have in common with the divine, namely rationality. Hence, from the Stoic point of view, prayer is really for our own benefit, and not for the benefit of the higher power, who needs nothing from us. It is conducive to a broader perspective into, equanimity. The final technique used by the Stoics is gratitude. The Stoics thought that by consciously and deliberately reviewing everything you have to be grateful for, health, family, friends, basic economy, economic stability, particular sets, etc., you can not only replace negative thoughts with positive ones, but in time generate greater resilience, joy, and peace of mind. Nowhere in Stoicism is the practice of gratitude more clearly attested than in Book 1 of Meditations, where Marcus warmly thanks his family, friends, and mentors for everything they've done for him. All right. Why not just meditate at that point? Why read about it rather than doing it, you know? Well, I don't know. People might seem to want to hear about it. This is just the introduction. All right, we're going to continue. The Stoics held that any mature, reasonable adult should be capable of applying these techniques in daily life for greater self-control and happiness. These skills do require constant, lifelong practice, but they lie squarely within our power as they are internal to our own mind, the only thing we actually have command over. But there is another crucial factor for developing the Stoic mindset that has to do with our response to external stimuli. The mind is not a closed system. The external world presents all kinds of interests, opportunities, and temptations. Many people, now in ancient times, crave what the world has to offer: fame, honor, power, money, material possessions, love, physical connection, community, political stability and safety, mind-altering substances, travel, and fancy food, to name a few. The Stoic attitude towards these external goods is one of detachment and even wariness. The reason is straightforward. We cannot control them. Such worldly wares come and go, and often depend on other people. Since they aren't really up to us, we shouldn't trust them as sources of happiness. Moreover, they often distract us from what really matters. For example, time spent acquiring and maintaining material possessions is time that could be have spent better practicing self-control or doing other things that positively support mental strength, such as developing new creative or intellectual pursuits, or even physical exercise. Marcus is said to have loved boxing and wrestling as a child. Stoicism contends that the best life is a simple life, a life that is lived as self-sufficiently as possible, eschewing luxury and the jockeying for social position. Detachment and simplicity can and should be cultivated, and all it takes is a habit of first identifying what is it that's triggering your desire. For example, a new shirt, and then stopping and asking whether you really need it. Very often, the answer is no. By deliberately identifying and questioning the object of your desire, you build resilience to it. Resistance, not resilience, resistance. The end result of this process is repeated consistently. It is a less cluttered, simpler, and happier life. Easier said than done, you might say, and Marcus and the Stoics would certainly agree that it takes a good bit of discipline and work. Alright, cool. We have 3 people. Fantastic. Hope you guys have been enjoying this introduction. I don't know how we have. Oh, it's the last page. Okay. Wait, is that where I'm at? Yeah. You would be forgiven for wondering how Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor, could seriously advocate a philosophy of simplicity and self-restraint. After all, he was then the most powerful man in the world, a ruler who wielded near absolute authority over his subjects and commanded the world's mightiest military at the time. He has access to every conceivable earthly delight. There was no limits to what he could demand and obtain. It may seem a bit disingenuous for such a person to argue that one's only real power is the power over one's own mind. How could a very wealthy Roman, as Marcus certainly was, claim that a life free of luxury is best? Did he really mean what he wrote? We will never know for sure, obviously, but every indication is that he at least attempted very earnestly to practice what he preached. Born in 121 AD to a wealthy Roman family of Iberian origin, Marcus lost his parents at an early age and was raised by his grandfather, who did everything he could to provide him with a safe and happy childhood. This included private schooling by tutors who were well-known practitioners of Stoicism, such as Aurelius and the Stoic. Thus Marcus was effectively raised as a Stoic from an early age, and is said to have publicly avowed Stoicism at age 25. Ancient sources describe him as a thoughtful and largely benevolent emperor who would often show leniency and mercy towards his enemies. For instance, he pardoned Avidius Cassius, a general who led a failed revolt against him in Egypt. Cassius was eventually assassinated by his own troops, but Marcus, in another show of magnanimity to his enemy, refused to receive Cassius's head, a customary tribute to the emperor. Ancient biographers also note Marcus's fragility and unpretentiousness. he still showed the same respect to his relations that he had when he was an ordinary citizen, and he was as thrifty and careful of his possessions as he has been when he lived in a private household. Write the authors of Histoire Augusta, an ancient biographical source. So as far as we know, Marcus's deeds matched his words. All right. We're still going. Okay. We're almost there, guys. We're almost there. Marcus Aurelius might be the closest thing to an actual philosopher king the world has ever seen, though he would have rejected the appellation of philosopher, since he did not consider himself to be a serious professional philosopher, just a man aspired to wisdom. He understood his main role to be leader of the Roman people, and he dedicated his life to bringing peace and prosperity to the empire that he governed. He did not significantly challenge the political status quo, and he certainly did not try to change the empire according to some utopian philosophical version. Rather, he sought to strengthen the existing imperial structures and to make them more stable and just. So it is from that standpoint, taking Marcus's first and foremost as the Roman Empire, who also happened to be practicing Stoic, and not as a Stoic philosopher who became emperor, that his meditations should be evaluated. Arguably, if looked at from his perspective, then his philosophy of self-control and simplicity becomes even more compelling. Here is a man who wanted for nothing. He had all the power, respect, and wealth anyone could have ever wanted at the time, and yet was at pains to remind himself over and over in private notes that true happiness has nothing to do with such things, but instead springs from a well-ordered mind. In our own times of frenzied materialist consumption, incessant electronic distractions, and political cacophony, we would do well to heed the message. And that was written by Peter Baum, an associate professor of philosophy at the University of Puerto Rico, Rio Pedias. All right, cool. That was the introduction, guys. I think that was really well written. I have a hard time sometimes comprehending what I read, but I think reading out loud really does help. I don't know what to reflect on about reading that. It's just really interesting learning more about like an overview of who he is. All right. Should I continue, or should we chat with people? What do we want to do? More book or just chat? Oh, I appreciate the likes. We're at 15,000 likes. Holy moly! You guys are amazing. Amazing. Get some more water. Welcome in, people. Welcome in. I'll keep reading for a bit. I'll keep reading a little bit, and then we can switch to chatting with people afterwards potentially. Okay, so meditations. This is book 1, and this is him reflecting on people, like important people in his life. From my grandfather Verus, I learned good morals and the government of my temper. From the reputation and remembrance of my father, modesty and a manly character. Man, I'm getting some burps. All right. From my mother, piety and beneficence, and abstinence, not only from evil deeds, but even from the evil thoughts, and further simplicity in my way of living, far removed from the habits of the rich. From my great-grandfather, not to have frequented public schools and to have the good teachers at home, and to know that on such things a man should spend liberally. From my governor, to be neither of the green nor of the blue party at the time at the games in the circus, nor a partisan either of the Permelius of the Scolatarius at the gladiators' fights. From him, too, I learned endurance of labor, and to want little, and to work with my own hands, and not to meddle with other people's affairs, and not to be ready to listen to slander. From Diogenes, not to busy myself about trifling things, and not to give credit to what was said by miracle workers and jugglers about incantations, and the driving away of daemons and such things, and not to breed quarrels for fighting, nor to give myself up passionately to such things, and to endure freedom of speech, and to have become intimate with philosophy, and to have been a hearer first of Bacchus, then of Tandisius and Marcinus, and to have written dialogues in my youth, and to have desired a plank, bed, and skin, and whatever else of the kind belongings to the Grecian discipline. From Rusticus I received the impression that my character required improvement in discipline, and from him I learned not to be led astray to sophistic emulation, nor to writing on speculative matters, nor to delivering little hortatory orations, nor to showing myself off as a man who practices much discipline, or does benevolent acts in order to make a display, and to abstain from rhetoric and poetry and fine writing, and not to walk about in the house in my outdoor dress, nor to do other things of the kind, and to write my letters with simplicity, like the letter which Rusticus wrote from Cynissa to my mother, and with respect to those who have offended me by words, or done me wrong, to be easily disposed to be pacified and reconciled, as soon as they have shown a readiness to be reconciled, and to read carefully, and not to be satisfied with the superficial understanding of a book, nor hastily to give my assent to those who talk overmuch. And I am indebted to him for being acquainted with the discourses of Epictetus, which he communicated to me out of his own collection. Okay. From Apollonius I learned freedom of will, and undividing steadiness of purpose, and to look to nothing else, not even for a moment, except to reason, and to always be the same, and to be always the same, in sharp pains on the occasion of the loss of a child, and in long illness, and to see clearly in a living example that the same man can be both most resolute in yielding, and not peevish in giving his instruction, and to have had before my eyes a man who clearly considered his experience and the skill in expounding philosophical principles as the smallest of his merits. And from him I have learned how to receive from friends what are esteemed favors, without being either humbled by them or letting them pass unnoticed. Alright, we'll continue. From Sextus, a benevolent disposition, and the example of a family governed by the fatherly manner, and the idea of living comfortably to nature, and gravity without affectation, and to look carefully after the interests of friends, and to tolerate ignorant persons, and those who form opinions about consideration. He has the power of readily accommodating himself to all, so that intercourse with him was more agreeable than any flattery, and at the same time he was most highly venerated by those who associated with him, and he had the faculty born both of discovering and ordering, in an intelligent and methodical way, the principles necessary for life, and he never showed anger or any other passion, but was entirely free from passion, and also most affectionate, and he could express approbation without noisy display, and he possessed much knowledge without ostentation. Some of these words, I'm gonna get another drink. Awesome, we have 2 people. Appreciate you guys just hanging out. I'll keep reading. Just get some water. Very nice. Alright, we continue. From Alexander, the grammarian, to refrain from fault finding, and not in a reproachful way to chide those who uttered any barbarous or solistic or strange sounding expression, but dexterously to introduce the very expression which ought to have been used, and in the way of answer or giving confirmation, or joining in an inquiry about the thing itself, not about the world, or by some other... Whoa. Whoa, I'm getting... I got like a reconnection thing there. I don't know if you guys dropped off or not. But anyways, whoa, that was loud. Okay, we'll restart this. From Alexander, the grammarian, to refrain from fault-finding, and not in a reproachful way to chide those who uttered any barbarous or soul-christic or strange-sounding expression, but dexterously to introduce the very expression which ought to have been used, and in a way of answering or giving confirmation, or joining in an inquiry about the thing itself, not about the world, or by some other fit suggestion. 11. From Fronto 1, I learned to observe what envy and duplicity and hypocrisy are in a tyrant, and that generally those among us who are called patricians are rather deficient in paternal affection. 12. From Alexander the Platonic, not frequently nor without necessity to say any more, or to write in a letter, that I have no leisure or continually to excuse the neglect of duties required by our relation to those whom we live, by alleging in urgent occupations. 13. From Catullus, not to be indifferent from a friend finds fault, even if he should find fault without reason, but to try to restore him to his own usual disposition, and to be ready to speak well of teachers, as it is reported of Dominatus and Athenodotus, and to love thy children truly. 14. For my brother Severus, to love my kin, and to love truth, and to love justice, and through him I learned to know Thracia, Helveticus, Cato, Dion, Brutus, and from him I received the idea of a polity, in which there is the same law for all, a polity administered with regard to equal rights and equal freedom of speech, and the idea of a kingly government which respects most of the freedom of the governed. I learned from him also consistently an undeviating steadiness in regards for philosophy, and a disposition to do good, and to give to others readily, and to cherish good hopes, and to believe that I am loved by my friends, and in him I observed no concealment of his opinions with respect to those whom he condemned, and that his friends had no need to conjecture what he wished to do, what he wished or did not wish, but it was quite plain. Alright, cool. We'll continue. 15. From Maximus, I learned self-government, and not to be led aside by anything, and cheerfulness in all circumstances, as well as in illness, and a just admixture in the moral character of sweetness and dignity, and to do what was set before me without complaining. I observed that everybody believed that he thought as he spoke, and that in all that he did he never had any bad intention, and he never showed amazement and surprise, and was never in a hurry, and never put off doing a thing, nor was perplexed, nor dejected, nor did he ever laugh to disguise his vexation, nor, on the other hand, was he ever passionate or suspicious. He has accustomed to do acts of beneficence, and was ready to forgive, and was free from all falsehood, and he presented the appearance of a man who could not be diverted from right rather than a man who had been improved. I observed, too, that no man could ever think that he was despised by Maximus, or ever venture to think himself a better man. He had also the act of being humorous in an agreeable way. Cool. Alright. Appreciate the likes. We're at 23,000? Dude, you're killing it. Thank you. Appreciate you. We'll continue. 16. In my father I observed mildness of temper, an unchangeable resolution to the things which he had determined after due deliberation, and no vainglory in all the things which men call honors, and a love of labor and perseverance, and a readiness to listen to those who had anything to propose for the common weal, and an undeviating firmness in giving to every man according to his deserts, as a knowledgeable derived from the experience of the occasions for vigorous action and for remission. And I observed that he had overcome all passions for joys, and he considered himself no more than another citizen. He realized his friends from all obligation to sup with him or to attend him to the necessary when he went abroad, and those who failed to accompany him by reason of any urgent circumstances always found him the same. I observed, too, the habit of careful inquiry in all matters of deliberation, and his persistently, and that he never stopped his investigation, though being satisfied with appearances which first present themselves, and that is his disposition was to keep his friends, and not to be soon tired of them, nor yet to be extravagant in his affection, and to be satisfied on all occasions, and cheerful, and to foresee things a long way off, and to provide for the smallest without display, to the check immediately popular applause and flattery, and to ever watchful over the things which were necessary for the administration of the empire, and to be good manager of the expenditure, and patiently to endure the blame which he got for such conduct. And he was neither superstitious with respect to the gods, nor did he court men by gifts, or by trying to please them, or by flattering the populace, but he showed sobriety in all things and firmness, and never any means which thoughts or actions, nor love or novelty, and the things which conduce in any way to be commodatory of life, and of which fortune gives an abundant supply, he used without arrogance and without excusing himself, so that when he had them, he enjoyed them without affection, and when he had them not, he did not want them, nor no one could ever say of him that he was either a sophist or a homebred, flippant slave, or a pedant, but everyone acknowledged him to be a man ripe, perfect, above flattery, able to manage his own and other men's affairs. Besides this, he honored those who were true philosophers, and he did not reproach those who pretend to be philosophers, nor yet was he easily led by them. He was also easy in conversation, and he made himself agreeable without any offensive affectation. He took a reasonable care of his body's health, not as one who was greatly attached to life, nor out of regard to personal appearance, nor yet in a careless way, but so that, through his own attention, he very seldom stood in need to the physician's art, or the medicine or external applications. He was most ready to give way without envy of those who possessed any particular faculty, such as that of eloquence, of knowledge, or knowledge to the law of the morals, or of anything else, and he gave them his help, and each might enjoy reputation according to his deserts, and he always acted comfortably to the institutions of his country, without showing any affection in doing so. Further, he was not fond of change, nor unsteady, but he loved to stay in the same places, and to employ himself about the same things, and after his paroxysms of headache he came immediately fresh and vigorous to his usual occupations. His secrets were not many, but very few and very rare, and those only about public matters, and he showed prudence and economy in exhibition to the public spectacles, in the construction of public buildings, his donations to the people, and in such things, for he was a man who looked to what ought to be done, not to the reputation which is got by a man's acts. He did not take the bath at unseasonable hours. He was not fond of building houses, nor curious about what he eat, nor about the texture and color of his clothes, nor about the beauty of his slaves. His dress came from Lorium, his villa on the coast, and from Lanivium generally. We know how he behaved to the toll collector at Toscium, who asked his pardon, and such was all his behavior. There was in him nothing harsh, nor implacable, nor violent, nor, as one may say, anything carried to the sweating point, but he examined all things severely, as if he had abundance of time, and without confusion, in an orderly way, vigorously and consistently. And that might be applied to him with which is recorded by Socrates, that he was able both to abstain from and to enjoy those things which many are too weak to abstain from, and cannot enjoy without excess, but to be strong enough both to bear the one and to be sober in the other is the mark of a man who has perfect and invincible soul, such as showed in the illness of Maximus. All right, cool. That was a long one. We're gonna get some more water. More water. Appreciate you guys hanging out. This is great. We're getting through this. We are getting through this. Okay, 17. To the gods I am indebted for having good grandfathers, good parents, a good sister, good teachers, good associates, good kinsmen and friends. Nearly everything is good. Further, I owe it to the gods that I am not hurried into any offense against any of them, though I had a disposition which, an opportunity had offered, might have led me to do something of this kind. But though their favor, there never was such a concurrence of circumstances as put me to their trial. Further, I am thankful to the gods that I was no longer brought up with my grandfather's concubine, and that I preserved the flower of my youth, and that I did not make proof of my virality before the proper season, and even deferred the time that I was subjected to a ruler and a father who was able to take away all pride from me, and to bring me to the knowledge that it was possible for a man to live in a palace without wanting either guards or embroidered dresses, or torches and statues, and such like show. But it is in such a man's power to bring himself very near to the fashion of a private person, without being, for this reason, either meaner in thought or more remiss in action, with respect to the things which must be done for the public interest in the manner that benefits a ruler. I thank the gods for giving me such a brother, who was able by his moral character to rouse me to vigilance over myself, and who, at the same time, pleased me by his respect and affection, that my children have not been stupid nor deformed in body, that I did not make the proficiency in rhetoric, poetry, and other studies, in which I should perhaps have been completely engaged, if I had seen that I was making progress in them, that I made haste to place those who brought up me in the station of honor, which they seemed to desire, without putting them off with hope of my doing, if sometime after, because they were still young, and I knew Apollonius, Rusticus, Maximus, and I received clear and frequent impressions about living according to nature, and what kind of life that is, so that, so far as dependent on the gods and their gifts to help and inspirations, nothing hindered me from forthwith living according to nature, though I still fall short of it through my own fault, and though not observing the admonitions of the gods, and, I may almost say, their direct instructions, that my body has held out so long and such a kind of life, that I never touched either Benetica or Theodes, and that, after have fallen into emanatory passions, I was cured, and, though I was often out of humor with Rusticus, I never did anything of which I had occasion to repent, and though it was my mother's fate to die young, she spent the last years of her life with me, that, whenever I wished to help my man in his need, or on any other occasion, I was never told that I had not the means of doing it, and that to myself the same necessity has happened, to receive anything from another, that I have such a wife, so obedient, and so affectionate, and so simple, that I have abundance of good masters for my children, and the remedies that have been shown to me by my dreams, both others and against blood spitting and giddiness, and that, when I had an inclination to philosophy, I did not fall into the hands of any sophist, and that I did not waste my time on writers of histories, or in the resolution of syllogisms, or occupy myself about the investigation of appearances in the heavens. For all these things require the help of the gods and fortune. Among the quadili at the granua. All right. We got there. That was the first book of him just reflecting on all these people in his life, which I think is such an important thing to do. Just like thinking back, like even like both like the good and the bad people. Like I wouldn't wish my life upon anyone, but like people have made me who I am today, and I'm much more better because of that. I think it's really interesting just reading. Like I don't have much to say about like his particular like takes on any of these people. But it's a good practice, I think, to just be thankful and grateful for the people in your life that have shaped you into who you are today. So yeah, I think I'm going to stop there for today. I'll continue tomorrow, I think. We'll do this tomorrow. But I'm feeling like doing this. No, that got... okay. We're gonna type this out. What's been on your mind lately? Oh no, I did freaking space under there. Let's get this space out of here. Apply. Wait, I'm gonna end this on